Welcome to Hudson Valley Omnivore, episode 4. I am Paul Fernetovich, and today we're talking bagels, my favorite. I know I say that literally at the beginning of every show. I talked a little bit about, at the end of last show, about this episode to be a primer. We do sort of kind of the same thing, go around to bagel joints. I thought about that a little bit and decided there are folks in the Hudson Valley that go to New York City on a regular basis. They're from New York City, been going to the same bagel joints in and around the Hudson Valley and in New York City for 25, 30 years. You don't need me to tell you about good bagels. However, I do want to tell 3 stories today. The first of which is about a place called Circles Bagels, which is here in Hudson. And I have an interview with Tepper, who is the founder and runs the crew there, making delightful sourdough, naturally leavened, wild yeast bagels. And you're going to want to stick around for how this name Circles came about, because it sounds pretty straightforward, right? Circles, bagels. That's not why that's called Circles. It's a funny story. Anyway, stick around for that. Secondarily, we're going to talk about Maxine's Bagels, which is definitely very different than Circles Bagels. Much more of a traditional New York style Jewish deli bagel, and they are delicious as well. We'll talk about Jeff and his pop-ups that he's done in and around the Hudson Valley. And then we'll talk a little bit about Moonrise Bagels, which has created a new genre of bagel, the stuffed bagel, which was invented apparently by a couple on New Year's Eve of 2020. So yeah, crank up the toaster. I like my bagels crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. And let's get it going. Okay, so before we get to Tepper, we got to do what we do, which is to talk about the history of our subject, which is the Great Bagel, which has 400 years of history. It's been centered historically around a myth that the bagel was invented in 1683 by a Viennese baker to honor the King of Poland after he defeated the Ottoman Turks. And the story goes that the bread was shaped like a stirrup because the king was a famed horseman, and which is such a charming tale. Very good tale, but it's also inaccurate. The first mention of bagels and the true documented origins take us further back to 1610 in Krakow, Poland. And bagel was first mentioned in the laws of the Krakow Jewish community. There was even regulations that stated that the bagels were given as a gift to women at birth because the round, endless shape symbolized the circle of life and the protection against the evil eye. So then, why the hole? It was made specifically for function. And the bagels, this is genius, the bagels were sold mostly by poor street vendors who strung them onto long wooden dowels or ropes to carry them through the streets. It was sort of the first food cart, if you will, the original fast food. Fast forward a little bit, and then in Ashkenazi Jewish culture, the bagel became really deeply woven into the fabric of daily ritual and really survival. In Slavic lands, the bagel belonged to a larger family of ring-shaped breads, and there's even an old Yiddish lullaby called Buy My Hot Bagels, which was famously sung by street orphans trying to scrap together a few kopecks. And so it's a food like most of the greatest food in the world, born of poverty, but also celebrated with immense love. So then becomes sort of the immigration story. So when millions of Jewish immigrants fled Eastern Europe in the late 19th and 20th century, they took their rolling pins, their recipes, and they brought the bagel to the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And there it was transformed and transfixed from symbol of childbirth and survival into a secular icon of the American Jewish identity, and I argue a New Yorker's identity, really. So by the mid-20th century, maybe one of the greatest things ever invented, the Holy Trinity, the bagel, Nova lox, and cream cheese, which I love on a toasted everything bagel. And so why lox? Because keeping kosher meant meat and dairy couldn't mix, but fish is neutral. They were combined with the New York Sunday brunch tradition, which we all know of, and it became a cultural ritual as sacred as the ancient liturgy. Because of its beginnings, you might think that the bagel's too humble for geopolitics, but just like many of the other things that we've talked about, it was an important piece of the process. And the production of white bread was highly regulated by Christian guilds and strictly forbade Jews from baking or selling it. However, in 1264, Prince Boleslaw the Pious issued a statute granting Jews unprecedented liberties, including the right to buy, sell, and produce bread. And this was like a massive economic shift when you allowed Jewish bakers to dominate the grain processing market in Eastern Europe, which turned around and fueled the growth of the Polish agricultural export economy, which was a super important part of things. So you fast forward to New York City. Not only was the geopolitical world affixed on the bagel, but the bagel industry was also run by a literal iron-fisted monopoly, the Bagel Bakers Local 338. In true New York-style unions, ruled bagels in the early 20th century. So they were established in the 1900s. They were fiercely protective, completely unionized cartel, about 300 master bakers. It was a closed off. You couldn't get in. They spoke only Yiddish. Their recipes were top secret and controlled every single bagel baked in the New York metropolitan area, which is mind-boggling that was even possible. They were so important that when they went on strike in 1951, it caused the Great Bagel Famine of New York. It led to temporary closure of dozens and dozens of delis, massive spike in lox prices, and was a legitimate geopolitical crisis. We got to talk about sort of the ethical history of the whole thing. And of course, like many other things, there's a darker underbelly of bagel history, and mainly it's about exploitation of labor, as many things are. So late 19th and early 20th centuries, bagel bakeries were in damp, suffocating basements. I'm sure most of you have seen Moonstruck. They were baking bread at the bottom of Camerari Brothers Bakery. You can see that it's just coal-fired ovens. It's hot and it's tough. Workers were called benchers, though they were basically sweatshop conditions for 14 to 16 hours a day, obvious extreme temperatures. If you've made bagels, seen bagels, touched bagel dough, it's very tough and it's heavy and it's hard when you're doing that by hand alone. The air was, like many bakeries, thick with flour dust. So you have respiratory illnesses and boiling vats, because you obviously boil your bagels. That's horrific injuries from burns. And the entities that benefited were the tenement landlords and bakery owners that exploited newly arrived non-English speaking immigrants who were desperate for work and for money. And this is a story that we keep talking about throughout the podcast. And this is really the reason why Local 338 was formed, right? To demand 40-hour work week, safer conditions. And so that was good for workers. I mean, that was a very intense improvement in workers' life. But the handmade craftsmanship was really crushed, like many other things, with the invention of automation. So in 1960s, you'll recognize the name Lender's bagel making machine was invented, and bagels became mass-produced, frozen, shipped worldwide, which for the most part killed the traditional grueling sort of like artisanal trade, but also, I guess, let the worker out of the basement. One thing, though, all of the bagels that we'll talk about today are still handmade, so they're going back to its original roots, and although the conditions are much better, the work is still very difficult. And so let's learn a little bit about that handmade old school process for our interview with Tepper, Circles Bagels. Tepper didn't set out to be a bagel maker, came up in Brooklyn kitchens, worked at places like Diner and Marlowe and Sons, and then relocated to Hudson 2018 to help at Little Deb's Oasis, which many of you probably know. And I'll leave the rest to Tepper's words because it's a great story. This is Tepper from Circles Bagels. What I really want to know is your backstory, how you got started. I'm learning that you worked at Marlowe and Sons and then Little Deb's, and there was kind of like a process to that whole thing. So tell me everything about how you got from there to here.
Okay. Yeah. Full restaurant backstory. My first restaurant kitchen job was at Pies and Thighs, which is a fried chicken, still open. Actually, they just opened their second location, and they've been open for a long time, which is really impressive. So I started working. Yeah, they make fried chicken, and they have like a really cool pastry department too. So they have great cookies and donuts and pies. And
where is this?
This is in Williamsburg, pretty close actually to in Brooklyn, pretty close to Diner and Marlowe and Sons.
Cool.
So then I started working at Diner and Marlowe and worked there for a few years, like sort of just learning a lot. I learned a lot of pretty much like they're almost like a fine dining kitchen with like a restaurant that's not a fine dining restaurant, but like a lot of technique driven cooking. And so a lot of people who have passed through like those kitchens are really like sort of creative people who are like really serious and want to really like learn everything they can. So from there, I worked in some other, helped open a couple like smaller projects and did a little catering. And then I was aware of what was going on at Little Deb's. This was in like 2017, 2018. And I came up to Hudson to like check out the restaurant because I thought it was really cool, like what they were doing, the owners, and ended up coming to Hudson for a summer to like help them. But I ended up staying. And when I worked at Deb's, I started doing like pizza pop-ups because I really longed for the type of pizza that I was used to eating in Brooklyn, especially like sourdough pizza, which was kind of starting to like happen in Brooklyn. Like before I left, there were like a couple of places that were starting to make really like beautiful sourdough pizza, like Neapolitan style pizza.
I got it. So you're not talking like super thin, crisp New York style. You're talking about Neapolitan style.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know any. Yeah, I didn't know of any like slice shops that were sourdough at the time. So I started like trying to make pizza and trying to make sourdough pizza. I borrowed the Sparrowbush Bakery's sourdough. They were delivering bread to Little Deb's, and I was like, "Can I have some sourdough?" And there was a previous owner of Sparrowbush, and he was kind enough to just give me a little bit, and that's the same. That's the same one.
The funny thing about this has been an installment series about flour. This will be the 4th episode in this installment series. The first person that I interviewed was Grayling from Sparrowbush.
Cool. Yeah.
The interesting thing is, independently, every subsequent interview has been with someone who had a connection to Sparrowbush in some way, shape, or form, which I didn't know about. This was not on purpose.
Crazy.
So the fact that even prior to Grayling, the Sparrowbush, it's kind of insane.
It's weird. It's like the Sparrowbush podcast.
Very, very right. Everybody's gonna be like, "What is all this guy talks about is Sparrowbush? What the hell?" But what I've learned is the through line is the grain and the flour and the things that they do, and that's been historically what the through line has been, is people trying to use local flour and millet. So
cool.
Anyway, that's super amazing. So keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Sparrowbush head. Like, I love everything that they make. So yeah, so I was lucky enough to get some of their sourdough, and I just started like, I can't remember how I made a recipe for the pizza at the time. I think I was just kind of like looking stuff up. I was reading a lot of pizza literature, and both my pizza and bagel recipes have kind of like have gone through like a few different, 4, maybe 5 different sort of evolutions. And so I started making pizza, and then started having like a couple of like very kind of like fun, like low stakes pop-ups at Deb's making pizzas, which the reason Circles is called Circles is because it was like a joke about how it says like I couldn't get them to be circular. They were kind of like blob shaped. They're like, I wasn't executing a circular shape. Yeah. So
I love that story.
So that's how, it got named, the project. And and then I just started making bagels. In like COVID, I wanted to like experiment kind of using similar methods, but like applying it to a bagel recipe.
How'd you make the jump from pizza to bagel? Not that it's a far jump, but how'd you make that switch? You're down the rabbit hole of pizzas and sourdough, and then now you're on to bagels. Like, was there a reason why you made that shift?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that I had been thinking about bagels in the sort of the same way I was thinking about pizza, in the sense that like it felt like there was a poverty of like good bagels that I could get here the same way that I was able to when I lived in the city. So like it was on my mind, and it was something that like I was always kind of frustrated, like I was missing bagels. And then simultaneously, like I started making bagels in 2020, which was a year when it was much harder to like sit with people eating a Neapolitan style shared pizza, and like bagels were really easy to do, sort of like a pop-up that was just like a pickup thing where like people could pre-order it. And I think that was almost kind of like, it wasn't the reason why I started making bagels, but I think I was kind of like feeling a little creatively like blocked with COVID, and like restaurants were all closed, people weren't really gathering, and I think I was kind of like looking for a new thing that could like work within the context of like pre-order, pickup, kind of socially distanced.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Start with the bagels.
Yeah.
Give you the time to experiment, I imagine.
Yes.
And COVID was terrible, but it's certainly access to something new and interesting. We're grateful you did that.
Very, very much so. So you went from pop-ups at Little Deb's, then were you selling the bagels into other restaurants and things?
Yeah, well, in COVID is when like I started selling them at Deb's, because Deb's was closed. So I think I had like a weekly like pre-order thing. Then like as things kind of eased up, I shifted towards like, I kind of was a roving bagel pop-up person. So I did lots of them at Quinny's. I just kind of like moved around wherever somebody would like host me. I went to like Hotel Tivoli. I did one in the city, or a couple in the city. That was like a year, 2 years doing that.
And then the location that you have now. Tell me a little bit about that, because Leanne and I have some experience with running a food business inside of another business and how helpful that was for us in a lot of different ways, mainly overhead. So I'm curious if it's similar situation that you had and how you ended up in at Spark.
I'm curious about your experience with that. So, like, the Spark building, which is owned by the Spark of Hudson, was not open yet and was like, and had built out this like very open concept cafe space, which they were looking for a vendor for. And there was like an application for vendors, potential vendors, with like sort of a focus on like somebody who's interested in more sort of like community oriented work, or like ways to sort of like do community oriented programming within a business that would be functioning out of that space. And that was something that like I care about that kind of things. I wanted to maybe like try something out with having a space, but I also very hesitant about it because of knowing what it's like seeing other people or being part of things where like I definitely have observed like how difficult it is to like really have a space that you need to operate at all times. So I applied and like was open to the possibility of like something a little bit more flexible within that space, and it ended up working out. But there was a lot of sort of like equipment / operational. There's a lot of ways in which like the space was almost like set up for like somebody to like bring like croissants or something and make like affogatos, but it wasn't like a functional kitchen where like I could see us running the type of like service kind of thing that we do at Circles. There was basically a full kitchen build out that we built, like a prep kitchen in this like huge basement that they have there. And that's like the only way that we've been able to like really do like what we are doing is with like this another kitchen, like where we can do everything that we need to do in terms of like making our bagels and like having space to do prep and like do all of our pickles and all of our things that we make to put on the bagels. So
How big is the kitchen downstairs?
it's really nice. I square footage wise, I don't know, but there's a basement that's as big as like the first floor of the building, and the kitchen is not that size. It's like, I would say about a quarter. It's almost like as big as like what Circle space is like in the dining room, like that much space.
Oh, that's
Yeah. It's
so. Did you have to buy all the equipment and put that in there, or do they help with that?
They own that space, and therefore I kind of suggested like what one, being me, would need in order to operate out of that prep kitchen. But it was kind of like a matter of convincing them that they need I think the kitchen really serves them because like they want to develop this building into like an event space. So it almost had like a shared sort of like vision. So they kind of outfitted it, and they had the same person or help like outfitting that space as like the upstairs cafe space, which was already like, it had like a couple refrigerators and like an espresso machine that was like already there before I got there.
That's really cool. That's a great story. And that's interesting because so Leanne and I owned a cafe back in Washington State, which I won't get all into, but it was inside of the Tacoma Glass Museum.
Oh, wow.
And it was sort of a similar situation. They had rotating vendors that had been in there, and they had an empty space, and they asked for proposals. It was similar in that they had a kitchen pretty much fully built out. I mean, we didn't have to buy much of anything.
That's awesome.
For that. And then, the economics of it all made much more sense, not just from the outlay up front, but also the way that everything was organized, and they paid for garbage, water, electricity. Like, we didn't pay for any of that. So that it's very cool.
Yeah.
That it sounds like not the same, but a similar situation at Spark where
it's very similar.
They're helping you
Yes.
immensely, because there's almost no other way to have a successful startup unless you've got help like that. I mean,
oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I haven't seen anyone who can do a business like from scratch without investors, and so I think of them as like investors in a way, even though like I'm not going to walk away with the bread mixer, you know what I mean? Like they've given me what I need in order to like make the bagels. Like it's not like cash flow, but it's like the equipment. So I wouldn't have been able to like do that without some.
Yeah. And as you mentioned before, you have similar missions. There's an agreement on the mission of Spark and the mission of Circles, or they have there's some symbiosis.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they wanted something in this space in terms of like a vendor who was like representative of like the town of Hudson that we have here. Like I think it was almost like the right time and the right situation where like I'm somebody who's like lived here for a while. I'm very like I've having done pop-ups everywhere. Like I feel like I'm like my project was kind of part of like the community of like restaurants and like food people here, and I think that they were generous about like wanting to like sort of like help somebody who was doing like very local pop-ups and stuff like that. I've been in that space for almost exactly 2 years since Memorial Day of 2024.
So tell me a little bit about, let's stick with the business side of things for a second. You have an interesting way that you price things and the way that you give back, how you're helping the community, how you're using your pricing and your business model to sort of drive that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess to preface that, I'm making a product that a lot of people expect to be a certain price point at a much higher price point because of the ingredients that we use and because of like the way that it's made. So because of that, like it was really important to me to find some way to like I want my product to be accessible. So I thought of this basically like model where adding a pretty like small donation to most purchases would like help to fund some folks who like want to opt to get the product at a lower price point, basically. And it's kind of loosely based on Rolling Grocer's tiered pricing model, which is great. And I think what they do is like so cool, and they're into food justice and food access and stuff. So I don't know if it's like a perfect system, but it makes me feel really good when people use the pickle pricing. There's like two different kind of discounted levels of pricing. The lowest one is like almost like value, like the value of like the product, like we're making nothing on it, and like the labor's not being paid for, so like I guess it would be kind of like operating at a little bit of a loss. The kind of higher discounted option is like I think it's like a 33%, like a third discounted option, so people can choose which one like works better for them, and like yeah, it makes us feel really good when like people use that and they're able to like eat our food if they otherwise weren't able to.
Really cool. And actually, that's a good segue into more of the like the baking and the process of things. I kind of had this conversation with Grayling about how difficult it must be, as Leanne knows, to sourdough at scale. You know, you take a regular bagel, a New York style bagel, commercial yeast. It's a whole fast process, and you know, it's downstate water, it's commercial yeast. It's like a whole different process, and just you're doing a complete departure from that. So tell me why you chose to go that path as opposed to traditional path, and what the difference means to you.
I just like don't really know any other way. I've done a lot of like sort of watching a lot of YouTube videos of like Utopia bagels and like places that New York City is an excellent place to have a bagel business because you can do things at great scale. And I'm not sure, I don't know how there's one place that I'm thinking of that's like doing sourdough bagels that's like kind of like taken off down there, and I'm not really sure how they're like pulling that off, like making that much of a like at scale with a sourdough bagel. I'm not sure how they're doing it because our scale is not that high, really, like compared to like a New York City bagel shop.
Right,
like we're doing like 200 bagels a day, or maybe like more if we have events and stuff. But like we're basically making a small batch product. It would be great if I had to figure out how to make more and like a much higher like scale of bagels, but we're doing like small batch bagels basically. So we're using like more sourdough like than, you would at home, but like it's a pretty manageable situation, especially like if you're kind of somebody that's learned how to bake that way. So I don't know. I think sometimes there's like a misconception that we're making like billions of bagels are flying out, and like Hudson is like a pretty, like the population of this city is pretty small actually, and I wish it were higher because I'd love to make more bagels and sell more bagels, but yeah, we're like a small batch bagel shop, I would say.
Is there something in it for you from the nutritional position or from the locality of the grain or the flour or anything that you're passionate about?
Oh yeah, totally, 100%. I can't imagine doing it any other way.
It's a default.
I'm kind of like crunchy into like, yeah, I'm like from California. I like to shop at health food stores. I like fermented things. As I get older, especially, I'm kind of more interested in things that are healthier. But I think just coming from like a place where I wasn't trained as a baker, and I'm kind of self-taught as a sourdough pizza dough maker. And so, yeah, I'm just coming at it from that. I don't know how to come to it from a different perspective. But with the flat, it sounds like you've been like thinking about or like talking on this podcast about like grains a lot. And we like use a percentage of like rye and whole grain flour that's like locally milled. It's like New York, up in the Finger Lakes more.
That's the other place I think that mills that I've heard of.
New York, we get our cornmeal from them, which is just like what we use like on the bottom of our proofing boxes. We use their rye flour, which is what we use for our sourdough. Not exclusively that. We use a mix to feed the sourdough, but we use their rye in the sourdough, and then we use the whole wheat farmer ground, exactly.
Farmer ground.
Yes, farmer ground flour. Yes, exactly. So I think that so I love the way that those products in a bagel dough, I love the way that it makes it taste a little bit nuttier. Like it just gives the kind of whole product a more complex, both like texture, and it has more of like a character, I think.
It's so much better. I mean, every iteration of installments for flours on the podcast has been, first pizza, pasta, or bread, pizza, then pasta. So in every instance, there was at least some amount of local grains that were going into the product. And it obviously differentiates based on what you're trying to accomplish. The Hudson Valley was a grain basket for a very long time, and now that's sort of coming back, which is really super cool. Yes.
Yeah.
And our experience with your bagels has been it's just been so delightful to get, because listen, I love a New York City bagel. I'm going to talk to another guy who's local who makes, just a traditional New York style sort of Jewish deli bagel.
Nice.
And that's wonderful. And
yeah.
It has a spot, and all bagels are amazing. But yours, from the flavor, the texture, and I mean, even just like the size of the bagel just is like overwhelmingly delicious. And that your pickles, Leanne's like obsessed with all the pickles that you ferment and stuff like that. I love how every bagel has that note in it. There's a fermentation note and a sour note to it that accentuates the sourdough taste in the bagel too. It's that brightness is really like, it's insane. We love it so much.
Sourdough, anything. It is massively enjoyable to eat someone else's baked good of something that I never delved into. I never got into the bagels end of things.
Yeah.
I was elbow deep in sourdough bread, focaccias and other things.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That makes me very pleased and honored, so thank you.
Thank you so much. So to take me through just like a quick overview of your whole process, sort of like from start to finish. 200 bagels a day is actually a lot more than I thought, which is super cool. Go ahead.
Okay, you're gonna give me a big head. I'm gonna like come out of everything so confident.
Good. More bagels. More bagels.
It's almost like a sitcom. It's like a comedic, like what you might imagine, which is that like I do have to like take my sourdough with me everywhere. So like it's the last day of our week today, so like I take the sourdough home with me, and it kind of like a pet, it comes home and it gets dealt with like wherever I go. We have a 5-day week basically, so the sourdough stays at work and is there, but like if I go like visit people a couple hours away, have like a stay over at a friend's house or something, like I bring my sourdough with me. But I think that's just like to say that like the week starts for open Friday through Monday, so like our week of sort of baking starts on Wednesday, which is like the day that we start building the like levain for the next day's dough, which would be Thursday. So like Wednesday I'll prep levain for dough that we make on Thursday, and then like it sort of like builds from there. So like into the weekend we're like prepping sort of a lot more. Like Friday is our biggest production day, so we make the most dough on Friday, and we have like more help. So while we're in service, there's bagel chefs in the basement kitchen that are portioning and like hand shaping every bagel, which is like extremely time consuming and like laborious, and like I could go on and complain about it, but so it's sort of like a 36-hour fermentation. We have a special dough refrigerator outside of our regular walk-in refrigerator, which is where the bagels spend like their first night. And that's because like we can set it at a little bit of like a higher refrigeration temperature. So I like them to be in like a 38 or 39-degree refrigeration space. My overall goal is like to have a bagel that's really fluffy and has a lot of like central air that like we try to protect the air that it builds over the course of its proof. So having like a temperature that we can manipulate a little bit like allows us to get like that type of bagel. Yeah.
It's very successful. You're baking bagels how many times during your service week?
We do it twice a day. Well, a minimum of 2 bakes. So like a morning bake for like morning customers, and then we do a second bake for.
You're baking bagels twice a day?
Yeah.
That's amazing. No wonder they're so delicious.
Yeah, we really want them to be like a real. Well, that's like the other like hard thing about like, you know, like these bagel shops in New York City that are like pumping out bagels, like that almost lends itself to getting a nice hot fresh bagel because like they run out, they have to make more, and like when you walk in you get a hot one. And like it's a little bit harder for us to figure that out here because we really want like people to have a bagel that has come out of the oven recently. On a weekday we'll do like a smaller morning like batch in the oven and then do like a smaller one in the afternoon just because like we want people to have like a warm bagel.
There's a noticeable difference. So I mean as difficult as it sounds to do that, and as much as I know what Leanne always went through with baking bread for our markets and for our store, that whole process to be able to do that twice a day is a Herculean task for sure. But I can say as a customer of Circles, it's much appreciated.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of important that we like state that like our goal is to make a sourdough bagel that's airy and almost like soft on the inside. Because I think there's a lot, like, it seems like everybody's making bagels or opening a bagel shop these days. I'm like a really picky eater, and so I want our bagels to be like exactly the way I want my bagel to be, which is I don't want like a dark, crispy bagel. I want like almost like to replicate the New York City bagel textural experience with like a more refined sourdough like texture and flavor, etc. So that's kind of like what we're going for, I would say, with like a lot of air pockets.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it because you kind of go right through it. There's not that same amount of chew or pull or anything.
Right.
There's a chew and a pull to the bagel in addition to the fact that it's really soft inside. I love that because the chew is the important part. I toast a bagel, but I would prefer a fresh bagel that you're tearing apart and you're just kind of eating through that. I would much rather that for sure.
So you mentioned that your week starts on Wednesdays. So are you an early morning or do you kind of do it whenever the sourdough is ready?
It's a great question. We're kind of timing things. We have to mix our dough really early. We mix our dough really early at like 6 because we want to start portioning it like when my staff comes in. And so like we want to let it proof for 3 hours. And then, so luckily again with temperature, we have like temperature control in our kitchen. So we'll build a levain the day before, the night before, and it'll have like a 10-hour time. And then as soon as we come in, we use it in the dough, and we're usually mixing really early in the morning and like portioning into service. And then once we form the bagels, then it's like having another kind of proof until the end of our service day. So we time it so that like the last person to leave puts the bagels into the dough fridge. It doesn't. I was kind of trying to go against the grain by having a nameless sourdough. Like my car has in it, you know, it's like I don't need everything to like I don't need to like personify it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember one time Leanne used to travel with her sourdough all the time as well. His name was Howard. She had this kitchen she baked at in Seattle. We lived in Tacoma. And one day I was not paying attention and I turned the cart too fast and the whole glass container with Howard in it smashed on the floor.
So what did you do? You saved a little?
It was an intense experience. I was in danger, physical danger, for a large number of hours.
That's a scary thing. I put my sourdough on top of my car once. McDonald's and started driving away with it.
That's very good. That's I really do. Yeah, there was a show that we watched about a guy who made pizzas, and that they were doing sourdough pizza. I don't forget where the guy was or what show it was. Anyway, he used to walk the sourdough every day, so that he would open the top of the sourdough and walk it around the neighborhood to get all of the wild yeast into it. And it was, not only was it a little kitsch, but he also had like a bodyguard. I mean, this is a famous place too, which maybe in post I'll find what that actually was so I can insert a little bit.
I'd like to know.
It was, we laughed a lot about that. What do you want people to feel when they come into the space, when they grab a bagel from you, when they eat that? Tell me what you want them to leave with when they experience Circles and you and your team.
I think that, like, kind of having said that we're making something that people expect, like, people have expectations about a bagel shop and what they're going to get. And I think we want people to be surprised by what they're getting at Circles, and kind of like, to give people an experience of a bagel shop that's not quite really a bagel shop, that it's kind of like a little bit more than that, where some of the like composed like specialties and things that we have are like doing more than what one would expect to receive at a lunch at a bagel shop kind of thing. So like, surprise is the main goal.
Chef Paragas from Little Goat was the last person that I interviewed.
Yeah.
And he said he wants you should just do better than you need to do. It was an interesting thing. So it's sort of in that aspect where you're like, I just want to bring something more to the table. So people come in, they're surprised, because we're not only always surprised. I had the ham and Swiss special yesterday or the day before, whenever we went there, and it was delicious and delightful and surprising. And not only that, but people feel, I think, taken care of and safe and welcomed in that space, and by your staff as well. Your staff is always really happy and smiling and sweet and very helpful. All right. Now, so the lightning round. So I ask, these sort of crazy questions to everybody. Some people think they're crazy, others don't. But the one question I always ask is, so you death row meal. So you're at the final meal, you're about to walk in, and it's going to be the end. What are you eating?
I think about this so often that like I'm taken aback. Oh, well, I guess I would say it would be something that like I eat almost every like other day for my last meal on death row, which hopefully is really just hypothetical.
Totally hypothetical.
You're under arrest, it's like my number one comfort food. It's basically a sourdough pancake that I make with the sourdough. Like, it's only something I feed only myself with this. It's like a really eggy pancake, sourdough, cornmeal, some Chase Home Farm yogurt, little maple syrup, and then I just smother it in peanut butter and jelly. And it's sort of
delightful.
Yeah, it's really good.
Wow.
I had it today. I had it yesterday too.
That sounds delicious. If you're going down, you want some comfort right before.
Yeah, peanut butter, I think too, is like a really big thing for me.
Our dog George, we give him his pills and stuff with it. So, but I buy like a case at a time, and he doesn't eat it all. Let's put it that way. But we go through it pretty quickly.
That's a whole other podcast.
The peanut butter podcast. Yeah. Mayonnaise as well. Okay, so the one flavor of bagel, if you had to make only one flavor of bagel and it couldn't be everything or sesame, what kind of bagel would you make?
I think plain, because despite the sort of like connotation of the word, like I really think that, at least for us, like I opt for a plain bagel a lot of the time, because I think you can get like the full kind of flavor of like what doing with the dough. And I like the texture of a no seed. I think it lends itself well to like certain things, especially like bagel sandwiches and like that sort of thing. So yeah, I would do plain, I guess. I mean, Poppy's also great.
So tell me that, first of all, I love it, because every time I test out like a pizza joint or something, like I always have like the cheese or the plain margarita just to like to test, because you want to taste the crust.
Yeah.
What's like the craziest bagel that you've made thus far?
We made like a turmeric bagel back in the day, and we've made like a cinnamon raisin with like kind of special raisins. I tried to like not really do the flavor inside of the bagel, although I have experimented a little bit, and I've found it to be, I've tried egg too, because I actually really like egg bagels. That one's a hard one to do like naturally because it needs food coloring in order to look like what people
To
think.
have the color.
Yeah. The cinnamon raisin I really enjoyed, and it was really difficult actually because the raisins change the hydration, and I think the cinnamon does too. It throws me off. I felt too like I can't control this, but it's delicious. I really like cinnamon raisin bagels too. I think that can be like such a great thing to like have a sweeter cinnamon raisin bagel.
Yeah, and it's sweet without being like too much, for sure. What's the most important piece of gear that you have? Like, what's the most important tool?
100% our bread mixer, because I've used other kinds than the one that we currently have, and the one that we currently have is like it's really made our bagels better, and it's a stationary spiral mixer, so only the bowl moves, and it's just amazing, even though it's kind of a pain in the ass.
So plug Circles for the folks that are listening.
I guess Circles is a bagel shop at 502 Union Street in Hudson. And yeah, we make sourdough bagels. You can get them by the dozen. You can come in and get a bagel sandwich. We serve them open face. There's lots to choose from. I think the menu's really pretty. There's something for everyone. So yeah, that's my plug.
I love it. And you're open when?
We're open Fridays through Mondays, 9 to 3.
And we literally have bagels in our house right now from you that we picked up on Saturday.
Do you freeze them?
I did.
Cool.
Them.
Like, what do you put on a bagel when you have one at home? Yeah,
American cheese.
totally.
Or cream cheese and a fried egg with some sriracha.
Yes.
Because I need to have that
Yes.
kick.
Yes.
I put literally everything on a bagel. I almost always sandwiches. My favorite thing is a tuna on a sesame or in everything, turkey and cheese, ham and cheese, egg sandwich, bacon. Yeah, exclusively bagels as my bread, and maybe Leanne's focaccia. All right. This has been delightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been fun for me too.
All right. So that's Tepper from Circles Bagels. Absolutely love their bagels. Have them almost every week. I'm an everything guy. Toasted, sesame maybe, if they're out of everything, which happens sometimes. But I will tell you that I do get lox, cream cheese, the whole bit, but I also add bacon to it, if you can believe that. It creates a surf and turf type of thing that many people will think of as blasphemy, but it's my absolute favorite thing. That and a sesame bagel toasted with tuna salad on, also delightful. Let's shift gears quite literally to Maxine's Bagels. Maxine's is completely different than Circles, and I think that that's why it makes so much sense to talk about them both on the same show. They're two sides of the same coin. I did a little Q&A with Jeff. The whole Q&A will be in the show notes, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about this joint because it's sweet. His mom passed away, and he named Maxine's after her. She taught him how to cook as a kid. She was very adventurous in the kitchen, taught him how to supreme fruit in elementary school, which is amazing and hilarious all at the same time. She's the emotional core of everything. This is how he keeps her present in his life. So that was really sweet. And Jeff's not a bagel guy. He came up in fine dining, working for people like Tom Colicchio and Lydia Bastianich, and in tough kitchens, high pressure. Obviously learned a lot in that aspect, but not really much about baking and certainly not about bagels. So he's 100% self-taught. And what you're getting from Maxine's is a traditional New York style Jewish deli bagel, which is just flour, yeast, and malt and nothing else. Just 36-hour cold proof, boiled, baked. It's got a distinctive bite, distinctive chew, and is very important to his style of bagels. He's currently baking out of the Caboose's commissary kitchen, and he's popping up at Kitty's Market on Front. He's popped up in a lot of places, Catskill mostly, and Hudson, which is great for me because I get to have his bagels every week. But, you know, his goal is a storefront, but the pop-up phase is a proof of concept. We're really working out recipe kinks and wanting to get everything perfect before he starts a brick and mortar, which is very, very expensive, as we've talked about. And it definitely fits a mold here in the Hudson Valley in that it's sort of bringing the New York City bagel in its best form up into the Hudson Valley. And because it's in the Hudson Valley, he has access to ingredients that may not always be available in the city. For example, he has a jam on the menu right now that's strawberry jam made with local berries from Morningstar and Berry Farms in Chatham. And he's going to be putting some blueberry jam on the menu now. The blueberries are out and tomatoes are coming into season. So he's providing seasonal ingredients on his bagels, and he's had a lot of success with that here. So I asked him, what's your top seller? Because I was curious about that. And Nova is definitely the top seller, which is not a surprise because as you heard in the history of bagels, Nova cream cheese bagel was a cultural icon in the city, and still to this day, for the same style of bagel that Jeff is making, Nova is still the top seller. And secondarily, a plain bagel with plain cream cheese, which is kind of funny. And so he's had an immense amount of success thus far, selling out most of the time. I have to get there early, otherwise all the everything bagels are gone. And so if you want to catch him, he'll be at Kitty's Market popping up on Fridays for the foreseeable future. So go check him out. Let's get into it, quite literally, with Moonrise Bagels. I wanted to include this here because this is a third genre of bagel. This isn't a topping. It's not a spread. This filling's baked inside the dough. So they have things like bacon, egg, and cheese, buffalo chicken, pastrami Reuben. They have a pizza bagel. And that was actually the original one. So the founders, Ali and Jeremy, sort of invented this because they were trying to stuff pizza into a bagel. It was New Year's Eve 2020, and they were experimenting with bread like many people were during the pandemic when there was time to do so. And so that led to how do they figure out how to fill the bagel and then it survives the boil and bake process without blowing out. So they didn't do any like professional R&D process. It was just them experimenting during lockdown. And they cracked the formula. They shared it. It spread fast enough that it stopped being a hobby. So Jeremy was in Union Square Hospitality Group and Ali came out of PR and brand marketing, and the rest is history. They have 3 locations now. So they have the original Woodstock shop. They have a shop in Poughkeepsie and in Greenwich Village now. I think that one of the funny things to think about is that they didn't even originally start just with stuffed bagels. It was one of the bagels that was on their menu, and they call it just the stuffed. And it's over now because everything is stuffed. All the bagels are stuffed. And I stopped by there and I actually got sausage, egg, and cheese, stuffed everything. And then I got the buffalo chicken, stuffed everything. They were both delightful. It's just this nice, neat package that you can just eat. No toppings, nothing slipping around, no mess, no fuss. And it was really delicious. You get the best of both worlds. I mean, you get, obviously the filling was delicious, but then you have a bagel that's on the outside. And it's a little bit mind-boggling, quite frankly, but very delicious. And it's definitely something that you should try. On our Instagram and in the show notes, the website will be there. Stop by one of their 3 locations because it's delightful and delicious and different, and you're really going to like it. Plus, the folks that own it are great. They did a collab last year with Downstate in Newburgh with a carnitas breakfast burrito stuffed bagel. So they're going to have stuff like that all the time. They also do food donation with Feed HV. And so it's good people, good bagels, very interesting story, and you should definitely give them a try. All right, folks, there you have it. Episode 4 of Hudson Valley Omnivore in the can. Hope you loved it. 3 shops, 3 completely different answers to the same question, which is bagels, bagels, bagels? There is no question. It's always bagels. And it's definitely worth trying all 3 because I think you're going to realize why these 3 were highlighted on this particular episode and why it was these particular 3. Plus, you don't have to go far. Come to Hudson, you can get 2 of them, knock out 2 of them, and then Woodstock's not that far away. All right, so this is the culmination of the installment series, Flour. We're done here, folks. We're absolutely done. Thank you. I know it's been a long, long road, and we're here at the end. And I have tears rolling down my cheeks because everything that was in this installment series was my favorite thing, as I mentioned. And I'm sure I'll say that in the rest of the episodes as well. But, you know, we started with bread of life, the quintessential platform from which everything became. We did pizza, pasta. We've had some great times in this installment series, and it'll stay close to my heart for the rest of eternity. So what's next? The next installment series I'm calling The Producers, and it's going to be focused on folks that are producing the ingredients that are going into all of these delightful and delicious meals all across the Hudson Valley, because without the ingredients, without the producers, the purveyors, the butchers, the farmers, the fishmongers, without these folks and the folks that are out there working hard to bring this cornucopia to life, we can't have any of the food that we've been talking about or will continue to talk about on this podcast in the future. So being that it's farmers market season, we're going to probably start with farmers and we're going to take it from there. So thank you so much for joining us today and for the rest of the episodes that you've listened to. And we'll see you soon for The Producers. Thank you.